What's up, what's up, what's up? This is your man, the STL Stranger, Umar Lee, joining you from Plano, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas, Texas. I'm here with Marwa Elbially. Is that how you say your last name?
Elbially, yeah.
Elbially, okay, all right. So, before we start, I want to tell people, so Plano is like this big suburb of Dallas, right? And one of the things about the Dallas-Fort Worth area is you have a huge and growing Muslim community. That the community is very large. That it's becoming a hub. When I go to the mosque, I meet people from Michigan, from Illinois, a lot of Californians, New Yorkers. This is becoming a hub for people to move to, and it reminds me of Northern Virginia in the 90s. Like Northern Virginia in the 90s was a place where people were moving from all over, because you had the Mahad, which was this Muslim university. You had all these scholars, organizations, and it was just seen for religiously inclined people as the place to go, as opposed to Michigan, which would be the basis of ethnicity or the religion. Religious growth was in Northern Virginia. So I see the DFW. You got Yasser Qadi coming here to East Plano. You got Omar Suleiman in Valley Ranch. But I also describe it as kind of a donut hole. The city of Dallas is relatively dead Islamically compared to many other inner cities, and the suburbs are absolutely booming. Would that be a fair assessment, do you think?
I think that's a good assessment. I think a lot of people are also coming here, just as many Americans from California and New York.
Yes.
Jobs.
Yes. 150,000 new residents last year alone.
Yep.
1 million in the last 9 years.
Right.
To give my St. Louis people a picture of this, in the late 1970s, the St. Louis metropolitan area was larger than the DFW. Today, the DFW is nearly 3 times the size of the St. Louis metropolitan area. So this place is booming, 4th largest metro in the country. I despise it with a passion, but many people disagree with me, and they love it. So the saving grace is, though, the Muslim community. It really is for me. I mean, I'm down here for my daughter, and that's great, but the Muslim community here is good. I was at Al Ansar Society last night. Tarawih at Mass. There's a lot of options here.
Yeah.
So I can see it's very appealing, particularly for young Muslim families or whoever. We see a lot of people in period are moving down here. So are you a native of Dallas?
No, I'm not. I'm actually from upstate New York.
Upstate New York.
Albany, New York.
Albany, New York. Okay.
I moved down here about 4 years ago.
Albany, New York. Yeah, I've spent only place upstate. I've been to Buffalo. I crossed the American border.
Into Canada. Yeah.
Yeah. Immediately got arrested. I didn't remember I had a warrant. You know what I'm trying to say? So I had to spend like 3 weeks in the Lockport, or Niagara County Jail.
Okay.
So I remember walking into the.
Was it a state warrant or was it?
No, federal.
Okay.
So I walked into the Niagara County, like, to put me on the floor of the pod, and these dudes surrounded me, and some dude walked up to me and looked at me, and he says, "Okay, that's not him," and everybody walks off, and I was like, "Yo, I've never been here before in my life, so whoever you're looking for, it ain't me." You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what happened. So I didn't have a pleasant time upstate.
Sorry to hear that.
My second time upstate, real upstate, because I've been in like the Westchester County and stuff like that,
Right.
was to Binghamton. I went to Islamburg in Binghamton because my ex, who's down here, came from that community. And I found it to be very cold. I would describe it to north of the wall for Game of Thrones people. It was just very, very difficult. So you made it out of Albany. In terms of
Okay, that's some warmer weather.
Get some warmer weather. Yeah, warmer weather. So you studied law up in New York, or you?
Yeah, I was in upstate New York my whole life before I moved down here. So I studied law in Albany Law School.
Okay, what motivated you to study law? What was why did you want to be a lawyer?
I've wanted to be a lawyer ever since middle school, actually. No, actually, John Grisham.
John Grisham. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
I made that decision early on, and then at the time, Bill Clinton was president, and Hillary Clinton was his wife, and they were both attorneys. And my dad was always telling me he wanted me to be the future president.
Okay, why not? Hey, why not?
So you
got 22
I had law in my head for a while, and when I got older, actually the reason I stuck with it is I did want to defend the rights of those who were subject to the injustice that I saw.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And now you're practicing mostly immigration law, right?
Ever since I opened my practice about a year ago, I mostly do immigration law, yes.
I tell you what, I had a friend years ago when we were living in the D.C. area, Muslim brother.
Okay.
He worked for INS. And he'd wear the INS uniform. Like, he was the guy at the airport who was stamping your passports, right? And this brother could not go to the masjid in peace. You know, he would go to try to pray, and, people would be throwing gifts by him, you know what I'm saying? And he was explaining to him, bro, I can't do nothing for you. You know what I'm saying? I'm just a simple guy. I got a job. People were offering him, their nieces, their female relatives, you know what I'm saying? He was like, yo, I can't do nothing for you.
Yeah.
So it's just like Jim Hacking back in St. Louis, who started out as a maritime lawyer.
Right.
Because, St. Louis is like, because of the history of the rivers and stuff like that. And then every time he go to the masjid, brothers would be like, yo, I need the hookup, you know what I'm trying to say? And so he becomes an immigration lawyer. So obviously it's a big issue in the Muslim community with a lot of elderly families and the Muslim ban and so many other things. Speaking of the Muslim ban, check out my last episode for the Yemen charity, trying to get some good things going on in Yemen to offset some of the bad that our government is helping to perpetrate there. So we're going to talk about a couple of issues: the Countering Violent Extremism program, which many people may not be familiar with, even though I've talked about it before, and just the general law enforcement climate, civil rights climate vis-a-vis the Muslim community in America. Before I get into that, it's related. I want to talk about an issue which almost everyone disagrees with me on. Not everyone. I would say there are many inner city, predominantly African American masajid that agree with me, but I would say of your suburban masjid, almost everybody disagrees with me on this police at the masjid thing. Okay.
Okay.
So they're in the height of the Ferguson protest.
Right. We're
getting tear gassed every day. Mm-hmm. Okay. Going home, your skin is burning. Your eyes are bloodshot. The whole 9 yards, and it's unpleasant. So I'm seldom out in the western suburbs of St. Louis, where the kind of the big this style of masjid is. And but I happened to be. I was a taxi driver at the time. I happened to be a fare out there near Juma, so I go out there. Mm-hmm. I see the same dude that I saw the night before. Part of the police assault, standing in the masjid parking lot is like the security dude.
Yeah.
For me, that's not a very comforting sight. That's not like a sight that I want to see when I go to the masjid. I know a lot of people, if you look at New Zealand, you look at other things.
Okay.
They like that. I personally don't like that. So number one, it doesn't give me a sense of peace. You go to the masjid for peace. But number two, I look at the other implications. That we know that law enforcement have came to masjid before and gathered information under the guise of being friends, under the guise of outreach, of networking, and so this troubles me. Can you kind of see where I'm coming from on that, or am I way out in left field?
I don't think you're way out of left field. I can see your discomfort if you had witnessed that, going from a protest to seeing a security guard there. Yeah. Of course, I come from a different perspective in terms of, I'm just like, okay, security, he's directing traffic, he's making sure everything goes smoothly, because the amount of people that come to Tarawih, you're talking about hundreds.
Yeah.
So you do need an authority that people respect so that they comply. When it's the brothers from the mosque, you do get a lot of pushback that you won't get when it's
I've done it before. They don't listen.
No, exactly. When you get the local officer, I'm not worried about those type of officers in terms of what you're talking about, informants, because they're out there, they're staying on the street, they're directing traffic. Yeah. I think when you're talking about people who are going to come in and inform on the Muslim community, it's not going to be those your beat officers.
But could people see how it could possibly be triggering for people that maybe have had a negative experience with law enforcement? This is not exactly what you want to see. When you want.
I could definitely see that perspective.
Yeah. And also, we have the Second Amendment in America. Which. Brothers can train. They can do security. I mean, Valley Ranch is a whole armed security team.
Right.
So if the
Epic does too.
Epic does too. Yeah. So if the concern is security, that's something that can be taken care of by the community. But if the concern is traffic, I kind of get what you're saying, because I used to do at Dar Hijra.
Yeah.
And people going for Tarawih, they would curse your mother. They would, you're just trying to get them to park legally.
Yeah.
They would curse your mother. They would make takfir on you, everything, just because they wanted to park.
They wanted to park
illegally.
Yeah.
And then when I would try to really put them in check, then
who are you? What's your authority?
No, the masjid. Oh, that's Brother Fulan. You can't. Trying to say so. And there's like two sets of rules. But if another dude comes in who's a cab driver, grab him by the neck and throw him out. So like you didn't know the kind of rules that are going on. So the civil rights climate for Muslims in America today, right? Mm-hmm. Which many will attribute to Donald Trump, which I think much predates him. George W. Bush, Obama. I don't think the civil rights climate for Muslims has been very good
I would agree with that.
For a very long time. But I do think because of Trump, you have a recognition that people kind of slept during the Obama years, even though a lot of stuff was going on. I said if for every selfie he takes with Jay-Z and Beyonce, he gets to kill 1,000 people in Yemen. That's the mathematics. Under W, this kind of consciousness rose in the American Muslim community, I think, and now it's back under Trump. Would you describe the civil rights climate today as better or worse than in the W administration, vis-a-vis American Muslims, in general terms?
I would say definitely worse in terms of the attacks are more out in the open, that's true, and it's just that the way the Muslims are viewed and the permission has been given basically to come after us. In the W era, regardless of like the legal issues that were happening, it was clear, like even after 9/11 he went out there and he was like, I don't remember his specific wording, so I don't want to like misquote.
Right, when he went to the Islamic Center in D.C.
Exactly.
with Nihad
So it was basically, it was clear that that you can't come directly and attack this community.
Right.
But I think it's very clear under Trump that it's basically,
Right.
Open gates, and we are being, even though that there was these laws and there was a system of discrimination against Muslims within the legal sphere, especially within the immigration and within even the criminal courts. But now it's just very open and direct, and I think there is a dangerousness to the velvet glove being removed, basically.
Do you think that the work that's been done over the past 15 years or so, the past decade, has allowed Muslims to address this in a more adequate manner, as opposed to the kind of hurried, haphazard reaction in the post 9/11 era?
I think we definitely have stronger organizations. I think CARE has grown stronger, and it helps in this field. I should say that I'm on the local board for CARE, so that maybe me a little biased, but I do think that we have a better ability to address it than we did even back in like 9/11 and in the 90s.
So that's going to bring us to one of my favorite topics to talk about, which is the CVE program, Countering Violent Extremism. For those that don't know, I'll let Marwa describe CVE, but it's a program which is countering violent extremism, which there's a lot of money there's been a lot of grants in, there's been a lot of Muslim people take money, help design the program, help run the program. A lot of people make a lot of money. And it's really not dissimilar to some other things that are going on in some other countries. And so I'll give you some of my gripes for CV, and then you see if you say, hey, you don't know what you're talking about, or if you have another perspective. One aspect that you don't hear about in CV much is I believe it's a real danger in the separation of religion and state, or church and state. If you're setting up a thing where a certain theology is deemed dangerous or to be monitored or criminalized by the state, that is basically prohibiting a religious thought, right? So and if you do that, and then you set up and fund and get grants to those you believe have an acceptable theology, you're in effect promoting theology. you're in effect promoting people. And we do know some of these prominent people. There are some prominent scholars in America a lot of people respect. I personally don't respect. But there's some prominent scholars who are calling to an abstract spirituality, who their teachers themselves are very much in bed with the governments of the United Arab Emirates and these other regimes that are very, and Sisi, et cetera, that are very, tyrannical to their own people. So I can see a model being set up almost like a mufti model, whereas if you're not with the muftis, if you're not with the approved religious class, then you're like the apartment masajid in Cairo. Trying to say you don't have the waqif khutbah, you have the I very much see that. So I see a separation, and then we get into the whole other civil liberties issues of that. But have you thought about that particular aspect of it?
I actually never thought about that particular aspect. My overall concern was just with the targeting of Muslims in general, more than any other group, for violent extremism.
Right.
Even though we've seen it play out in the last few years that most of the more violent acts are coming from like white nationalists in the U.S., but that was my concern, is that they were so focused. And there's also, I feel like there's just a general paranoia around all of these issues that makes people stop thinking logically, especially those involved. And like you said, the biggest problem with it is the money involved.
But you have
because it keeps people from from looking at it in a realistic way.
But you
the
have
threat's
people,
overblown.
You have people in the Muslim community. And one of the big issues in the Muslim community is you've had for years, if someone's mad at you or doesn't like you, they'll call the FBI and say, this guy's a terrorist or this or that. And, it's usually frivolous and they throw it away or whatever. But you have people in the Muslim community, some of these people getting grant money, who openly say, trying to say, that Salafis or conservative Muslims or these other, are by definition what they are educating against, right? And they're promoting usually, not to diss my Sufi brothers and sisters, but they're usually promoting some kind of Sufi light, some kind of abstract Sufi, not any kind of real tasawwuf, but and if that position is funded, you see what I'm trying to say? That's almost a state promotion of a particular. That would be like the state saying, okay,
I see your argument.
Yeah, the Lutheran Church is conducive.
I see your argument that they're promoting a specific theology within Islam.
Yeah.
I never really thought about that. My main concern was not even just the people who are publicly funded by CVE, it's just like the damage that CVE does within the Muslim community in terms of my whole issue with the whole counterterrorism thing is that we as Muslims that's become us. Terrorism, countering it. We're not. That's our discussion all the time.
All the time.
I'm always having to. Oh, okay. No, I'm not. We're really a peaceful. Whatever. That we're stuck into this narrative. We're forced into this narrative, and that's it.
And no one else is.
Yeah.
And no one else is. No one else is.
That's my biggest issue with the whole program.
Also, the fact that you used to go. I travel coast to coast. I'd show up to a masjid. Brothers be so warm and friendly, and they would take you out to dinner, and and I would say, I'm getting ready to check in the hotel, and they would take you to the that kind of brotherhood. You can't do it no more because of CV and other programs similar. There's such a climate of fear in the community that this guy could be an informant. B, this guy might be a bad news or something.
And it's legit because there's so many informants.
And it's so many
from all different backgrounds.
Another thing is that I'll give you another CV antidote. Is there's a masjid with a very prominent imam who is a very big CV supporter. Matter of fact,
he's a public CVE supporter. Very
public, and matter of fact, some people will call it. Actually, I gave him the nickname as the FBI's imam. But anyway.
Okay.
So I want to tell you a story where I think religion and this political climate, law enforcement, they don't go together.
Okay.
So he's a young man. He had some history in his past, arrests, criminal record. But like many people who have these types of backgrounds, come from poverty, he was seeking a religion. He was seeking Islam, right? So he had took a shahada in prison, and he was out, but kind of down on his luck. It's very hard for ex-offenders to find jobs. It's very hard for people, for many people, often struggle economically.
Yeah. So
he's hanging out at the masjid a lot, and because he's an African-American guy, he's got a big beard. And this is kind of a liberal climate type of a masjid, he's kind of sticking out. People are like, who is this guy? This or that. So instead of offering counsel to this brother, which would be the position of a cleric, which would be the position of a priest or a rabbi or, or the inner city imam, he goes to the FBI. Says, check out this guy. Well, it turns out he had a couple minor warrants and they arrested him, right?
Yeah.
To me, that is a grotesque violation of the position of an imam or the position of any religious institution. That someone is going there seeking spiritual help, trying to fill their spiritual needs, and they're being reported to law enforcement. I mean, even in the Catholic...
at least in that situation, from what you've described, the imam didn't try to give him counseling.
No.
So what for me is even worse is when the imams start talking with individuals and start knowing the real issues, and then they turn over that information to the FBI. I think that's just a complete violation of the... Yeah.
Keep in mind, and you can confess to a Catholic priest murder, and they will not they will not say anything, and people are hesitant to say anything to him. But I think it comes... I'm going to tie it back to what I said at first, is there's a climate of muftiism arising in America. Climate of muftiism, of the walk of imams. In terms of, is that they are...
they're given too much in terms of, yes, we respect you or whatever, but the core thing about Islam is there is nobody between you and God.
Right, but also...
Period.
But also I believe that, if you're coming from, say, Egypt, for example, where it's very understood that the government and the religious establishment, and you come to America, you see the political climate, you say, okay, this is what it is. It's so CC Trump, it's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of climate. Whereas we're supposed to have this array of civil rights in this country, of civil liberties that will protect us from something like that, right?
I think what happens too is that when these people are in this situation, some people don't consider themselves informants when they in fact are. So I've talked with some leaders and others who meet with FBI on a regular basis, and they give them information, but they don't consider it informing. They're like, oh no, I just tell them what's going on in the community and what's up, and who's coming in, who's coming out, and that sort of thing. That's another problem with this program, is it just gets people comfortable and they kind of disassociate with what they're actually doing, which is they're informing on the community. Right, they're informing that they're supposed to be serving.
There's no need for them to know who's coming, who's...
No, it's not relevant.
It's not relevant.
Honestly, it's if their goal really is to combat extremism and violent terrorism, you're not going to collect all this useless information. Right. Some of the stuff they collect is just who's been cheating on who. What's they just want dirt and leverage to use it to be able to get more information.
How do they collect that? Who's been cheating on who?
That's easy. You just have the other informants going in there, like that famous informant out of California that the mosque got rid of, Craig, I think Monolith or something. Monolith. That's a famous case where he would go around and he would actually proposition women because he wanted to get more information. He said, I was willing to even do pillow talk to get more information on the Muslim community. So this is the kind of stuff, and the kind of egregious behavior, but this is to be expected from an organization such as the FBI. And another issue I have with the Muslim community is they create, I don't know why they differentiate between their local agent, who might be friendly, who might be a really nice guy, but I keep telling them it's not relevant. What you're dealing with is dealing with an institution, an agency, and a system. So he could be the nicest guy, and I was like, he could genuinely be a really nice guy who really wants the best for you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is the policies that are being set and what's going to be implemented. Ultimately, he has to follow and toe the line.
Well, see,
and if he doesn't, he'll get replaced and somebody else will toe the line.
See, that's what I think. I think that, you know, those cares, get out those cars, know your rights, and stuff like that. And we've been telling people for years, don't talk, don't talk, don't talk, don't talk.
Nobody listens.
We'll get you a lawyer.
Yeah,
so in St. Louis, you know, you got care, but myself and, you know, a couple of friends of mine, we've been able to set up our own thing. So we have a handful of lawyers that will represent people. You know, anyone who needs a lawyer, we got you.
Right.
If I don't got you, Faizan at CAREX has got you. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Okay, we beat this in people's heads. But I think there's this attitude that we can sit down and drink tea, we can drink coffee, they get to know me, they see I'm a nice guy, this or that. Sometimes what happens is, as you know, you're under no obligation to talk.
100%, yeah.
But once you talk, you can't lie. You know what I'm saying? And so they'll catch them lying, get them already caught up on charges just by lying.
That's the easiest charge.
You know, do you know so and so? No. Okay. They know you know so and so. You know, just little stuff like that. So, but I think that there is some brothers are coming from countries, some families are coming from countries where there is kind of informal system, you know what I'm saying, where you can kind of sit down and drink tea and you know, like that. You can't do that here. You're dealing with institution with policies that are set from the top, bottom. That local guy may be a nice guy. He may be a friendly guy. Doesn't matter. Yeah. You know, he's part of an agency.
Exactly.
And that agency right now is, Donald Trump is president of the United States. You know what I mean?
That's the boss.
And that's the boss. You know what I'm saying? And so that is the civil rights climate. Now, down here in Texas, let me ask you this. So you have a red state, blue state divide. I was just out in the Bay Area. Okay. And that's a whole nother story. Not for the podcast. But talking to some activists out there. Okay. You know, they got, I think in Oakland and San Francisco, if I'm not mistaken, them local police departments to remove themselves from the JTTF of the Bay Area or of Northern California.
Great.
Obviously, that's because you have this grassroots political activism in the Bay. How difficult is it in the political climate of Texas? Missouri is a red state, Texas is a red state, but you also have a huge Muslim population here in the DFW. So how difficult is it to organize for Muslim rights in a place that, may not be as politically friendly?
I don't know, because I haven't really gotten involved in the local politics, so I can't really tell you.
But it affects it affects it, right?
It definitely affects it. I remember when I first moved down here, I saw a quote from the local FBI counter-terrorism guy, and it was something about a clash of civilizations. And I was just shocked that somebody would even say that or actually believe that in this day and age. But here he is heading the local, or I don't know if he even got promoted to national, but he's heading the FBI counter-terrorism, and he believes that there's a clash of civilizations between Christianity and Islam. Yeah. So that tells you, a lot of what you need to know in terms of the paranoia and the stuff that's motivating the creation of these kind of programs and the maintenance and targeting of the Muslim community. Is that the people in charge actually believe this stuff. I always thought that people didn't believe in these kind of conspiracies. When we say conspiracy theories, they do. And that all these Muslim organizations are tied to each other, and that there's all these cells out there, all of this
secret plans and plots.
One shocking case was that of Rafiq Sabir. When you have him going on stand, the government has almost nothing on him. And he goes up there, and the guy was like, "Well, we don't have anything." He's like, "Do you know what tuqya is, or whatever?" And then the doctor Severe had never even heard of it, and he said no. But the prosecution and the agents on the case are convinced, and that's what's pushing this forward too. Is that there is people out there convinced that there is sleeper cells everywhere, that there is whatever everywhere, and I think. CB, and I think the other thing is I haven't actually seen a lot of these shows. I've only seen snippets of them because I can't sit through it, like Homeland, and I think there was the old one called 24.
I can't watch that
stuff. It all plays into this narrative, and what the problem I have with it is we're always just in the same narrative. We're always in the same. We're put in this square, and we have to defend ourselves. And I want the Muslim community to get out of this.
And you have this massive funding for counterterrorism, and
the massive funding for that, yeah.
And there are very, very few, as in hardly any, people that would fit the description of what they're trying to investigate. And most of those would be outside the Muslim community that there are. And so they have to come up with justifications for that.
And I tell them, I tell the Muslim community, I was like, they have to justify their funding. They can't keep coming back and say that there's no cases, there's no bad guys out there. They have to close cases. They have to do these, it's not just going to be constant interviews. They got to close cases. Otherwise, how are they going to keep the funding for this massive,
So, last week, I believe it was, Donald J. Trump, when he was meeting with Sisi, might have been 2 weeks ago, he said the Muslim Brotherhood should be designated as a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't understand this, even Muslims. I don't like Ikhwan, so what? No big deal, which opens up a whole plethora of things.
Yeah.
First of all, anybody who knows Muslim history in America knows that Ikhwani activists, workers, established so much in this country. That's a fact. Turning from organizations to masajid to etc. So under that designation, you could, in theory, close organizations. You could close NATE. You can close masajid. There's so much damage you could do just from that. It's not about whether you agree with, Morsi should be out of jail or this or that. No. Number two, it leads into what I've seen for the Muslims since 9/11, the criminalization of political thought. In other words, if you go back to the pre-9/11 era, okay, you had people, Muslims, politically engaged people, very much involved in Islamist politics, in politics emanating from the Muslim world. Whether it be people like the California Hizb ut-Tahrir, they had the California Journal out in California. They had another newspaper out of Chicago, and they would hold conferences. That's dead, because that has been deemed criminal, right? Or just too dangerous. My old boss, Dr. Sohail Ghanouchi at Mass used to say, he would go to panels or go to speak and say, Islamist is not scary. I'm an Islamist. I'm here to tell you this is not something to be afraid of. You you had very much a Muslim political thought for many people that was rooted in an Islamic idea. You might agree with that. You might disagree with that. But I've seen that this political thought for Muslims has been basically criminalized. That if you come out today and say, I'm an Islamist, or you want to, I give you an example. I had a copy of Milestones by Sayyid Qutb, and the president, nobody see that. Well, that was something that used to be distributed for free at the masajid, right, and was in every Muslim bookstore, and was considered for education of a young Muslim is really essential reading, right? That was, no, you can't do that. So I see a climate today where Muslims are free to politically engage as long as in the playing field that they have defined. Trying to say Democratic, Republican, that kind of thing. And even then you might get a little bit of pushback. But once you kind of leave that kind of binary of left, right, Democrat, Republican, then you're deemed as kind of a threat. You're deemed as kind of a...
You're talking like Representative Ilhan Omar?
I think that's an interesting case for her. I wanted to talk to Omar Suleiman the other day because he mentioned this, but people were mobbing him. I find Ilhan an interesting person. Because from my background, it's an interesting pill to swallow.
Yeah.
I'm trying to say, you got to keep in mind when I was coming up under my teacher, Sheikh Rahman and Sheikh Ali Tamimi and other people. Nobody was voting. Okay, many people. Because I remember Imam Zayd Shakir, who's now very, he used to say voting is kufr, and that there should be no. The only Islamic strategy in America should be seizure of power. This was in the 90s, 70s. This was the grandiose thoughts. Even in the 80s and 70s, it was more. So to say you voted, like I always voted, like I couldn't give it that. But to say you voted was controversial. You kind of voted in secret. You know what I'm trying to say? Even, man, like I was young and in St. Louis, and I'm broke, and I was like, man, I think I should go into the military or something, man. I don't know what to do. And I went to go sign the papers, and I went to the masjid, and they said, "This is the army of Israel." There'd be brothers went nuts. Now they'd be like, "Oh, mashallah," it'd be a whole different climate. But from a young age, I never read Marx or any of these people on the left.
Right.
My political basis, of course, I learned from my family who were like old Roosevelt Democrats, but like was reading people as a young man, the Sayyid Qutbs and the Safar Hawalis and the Sheikh Suleiman and the Muhammad Abdus and these, the people, the revivers, the Islamic revival. Mm-hmm. So this is my whole concept in politics. So always entering politics, I had to kind of connect the two. Like, okay, I don't really believe in this system. I don't really believe in these parties, these ideologies, but you have to make a choice that is the lesser of the evils, or the most good, or the one that can do the most benefit to most people.
Mm-hmm.
So I always had I don't have a fawning attitude of any politician. Even though I've worked in politics and worked in campaigns, even more so because of that. People are people, right? Mm-hmm. People are people. So leading to Ilhan, I mean, she is attacked because of Islamophobia. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. She's a target for Islamophobia. She is vilified, lied upon, just like Linda Sarsour is, just like Omar Suleiman is, just like other people are, right? Mm-hmm. Any Muslim in the public spotlight, right? However, having said that, I saw this in Ferguson, and I see this in the Muslim community as well. You have big NGOs, big money organizations who have spent a lot of money in the Muslim community. And in the African American community and in other communities. These are organizations that the money is white.
Right.
And they have an agenda of a community they would like to shape. That's why I'm opposed to this concept of allies. Allies would be, you know what, I feel bad for the Muslims. Let me cut $1 million check to CARE because they're doing good work. Ally is not saying, you know what, I feel bad for them. Let me take this $1 million and go create an organization and create a leader and help shift the narrative within that community, help shift the political ideology in that community, help shift the social mores, etc. There's a lot of grant money pouring into the Muslim community. It's not pouring into the Lutheran community. It's not pouring into the Jewish community. It's pouring specifically in the Muslim community. We have big players that are funding particular people to help advance the growth of their own ideology. For example, you have, this is not Ilhan, but kind of on the same spectrum, you have these communist far-left organizations that now present themselves as the greatest allies to Muslims. The greatest allies to Muslims. And they're at every Muslim band rally, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is this ally, or is this seeing the suffering of Muslims as a potential for recruitment? And we have a lot of young Muslims that are really...
Yeah, you're always going to have that regardless of whatever movement you work in.
Because if we look at the history of
but if we take it back to the Muslim Brotherhood and that the way that everything gets connected though is that basically you can connect anybody to the Muslim Brotherhood.
Everybody.
It's it's not because they're actual connections. It's the same way that they do with the so-called terrorists overseas. It's just it doesn't have to be anything of substance.
Exactly.
It can just be allegations and guilt by association.
And that's a predicate.
And that's you have to think of the Holy Land Foundation.
Yes.
And how they listed basically almost every single Muslim organization in the U.S. as a so-called quote-unquote unindicted co-conspirator. Yeah. I mean, the case against the Holy Land itself was absolute garbage.
Yes.
But to this day, we're tainted. All those organizations are tainted because, it's like, unindicted co-conspirators, and all of this scares the general public because there was a criminal trial and they ultimately got convicted, even though there's zero basis and it was a garbage in, garbage out case.
And if you do, like the Holy Land, and they get this designate, they can do mass They can do ICNA.
Right.
They can do many other organizations. They own, control masajid, can control those masjids. I don't know what they can do.
Most of the organizations most of the masajid are with the NATE fund that you mentioned earlier.
Right. Well, the NATE would be a big one that they would go after.
And say that's associated with a terrorist organization. There's going to be serious issues. And they're always constantly, that so many Muslim organizations got targeted and they got shut down. These charities got shut down not because they were actually found guilty in the end of doing anything wrong, but just the court costs and the litigation and all of that caused them to have to...
Which will scare people away.
Yeah.
I mean, even if nothing happens, people will stop going to these masajid. People will stop attending. And
that's the problem.
And that's the problem.
Is that they put you on this, aura of guilt and without any real substance. Yeah.
I mean,
and if the Muslim community doesn't gather, what the Muslim community needs to do is gather around and be like, this is absolutely unacceptable, but we kind of fall apart, and that's also as a result of that CVE program.
Well, I think you also have different wings. You have a wing, which I think is based on the D.C. area in California, that they very much dislike kind of what they see as like a brotherhood friendly guard, in terms of very much dislike them. And I think they're going to they would use this as their potential to knock them out and to grow, like, cats in a barrel type of a syndrome. And so there's really, in the Muslim community, with a lot of people, there's not a lot of principle. If I can get ahead, if I can help this organization get deemed a terrorist organization and they can help me get more money, help me become the big platform. There's a lot of people who don't like CARE. There's a lot of people who would like to see CARE go under. A lot of people say mass go under. That's that one group. Then there's another one that are attached to these overseas muftis that are, and they have their own university or whatever, and they very much are opposed to any movement for justice, or social, here or abroad, because they're calling people to some kind of abstract, spirituality. So unfortunately, the Muslim community should unite against this designation, say this is an attack against everyone. I've seen other people do it. People like Abd Ayyub, who's of a Shi'i background, has no personal affinity for the Ikhwan Muslimin, but he knows this is an attack on the.
He's an attorney out of, I think, New Jersey.
No, he's from Dearborn, but lives in D.C. Yeah, but really great brother.
Yeah.
He sees this as an attack. I'm trying to say, you have other people, progressives, people like Khalid Beydoun, that he sees this. He's not politically aligned with that wave of thinking, but he sees this as an attack on the entire Muslim community. So that's what I would like to see.
That's what it is, because it can be very easily manipulated and used.
It can be very easily manipulated and used. But also I think it has a crippling effect on the individual lives of Muslims. Mm-hmm. That you're almost, I'm talking about in a casual conversation, mm-hmm. right? If an Egyptian American Muslim says he doesn't like Sisi and he wants Morsi out of jail and blah 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 and this and that and all the terrible things they're doing.
Yeah. Some
guy hears it, says, and that's a target. Now he's a target of investigation because of a political opinion.
Yeah.
Or if like when I was a young guy and I was given Imam Hassan al-Banna's A Letter to the Students and these other books to read, the guy giving that to me, who I'm sure anyway is a big target, but it's just for the freedom of passing.
It gives them the ability to open up cases a lot more easily, and it gives them the ability to go further in cases a lot more easily, to get those wiretaps, to get those warrants out where they can collect intelligence on you without.
And so you have some Muslims who watch and say,
well,
they say, I don't like Ikhwan. I don't like this stuff. Who cares?
I think it's because they don't understand the system and how it works and the consequences of an organization like that being designated. Yeah.
And meanwhile, everyone else is free. So if you want to go on any kind of Christian organization or non-religious, everyone is free for robust political debate.
Yeah.
But when it comes time for robust political debate, even unpopular opinions in the Muslim community, all of a sudden they became targets for law enforcement.
You have to watch your mouth.
You have to watch your mouth.
Because, I mean, it takes so little. Because like I was telling you, actually before we started recording the podcast about Ziad Yarri's case, he literally got convicted of, because he allegedly believed in the jihadi ideology, that he had to go overseas, which they didn't even prove that in trial because it's not true. But say this is what he got convicted of, is that he believed in this jihadi ideology, and by believing in it, he had joined in a conspiracy to join the global jihad movement. They couldn't even designate a specific group in this case. So when you're targeted by like such generic and like overfishing, so like if an organization like the Muslim Brotherhood gets designated as a terrorist organization, you can only imagine what kind of cases they can come up with.
And of course, the point of fact is, it's not a terrorist organization. So I mean, that's at the very base of it.
Yeah.
So if your message, in closing, if your message to, if you could tell the Muslims one thing, and it about knowing your rights, what would you tell them?
Just like, the old message that Carrie
keep your mouth shut.
Keep your mouth shut.
Keep your mouth shut. And if you could tell,
I just keep your mouth shut when you're dealing with these law enforcement agencies, but at the same time, like, don't keep your mouth shut. Like, start getting out there, getting involved in your communities, especially at a local level, and get out there. And with regards to the local police, start making those connections. I always like to differentiate between the local police and the FBI, but I can't really do that.
It's really hard to do in a place like St. Louis.
Right here, and even in Dallas, is because the JTTF encompasses, it has local cops on it too. But it is very important to do like you did, which is build those community relationships. Make sure you know who the local players are. Make sure you're involved and you're actually supporting your local community. So keep your mouth shut when it's an official trying to question you, but get out there and open your mouth.
I'll tell you something. I was stopped at by the Mexico border. I think I was coming out of Brownsville or Laredo, one of them two places, and they took me into their little station, searching at a van, searching it, and they asked me, where you coming from, what are you doing?
You get flagged every time.
Yeah, and I said, none of your business. I said, I'm an American citizen. I said, if I decide I want to drive to South Dakota to take a defecation, for no reason I can do that. I'm an American citizen. I have the freedom to travel. And they said, I said, I don't want to answer any of your questions. I'm not talking about nothing. I'm not doing nothing illegal. Blah blah blah. So okay, so it's several of them, including the supervisor. And then I started giving them a lecture, talking about Mike Brown, talking about Ferguson, talking about police violence, police repression, going on and on. And so the supervisor was an old Texas guy. He said, well, for a fella that doesn't want to talk, you sure have a lot to say. And I said, I don't want to talk about what you want to talk about, but I don't mind talking. I just don't want to answer your questions. So make your voices heard. Anyway, Marwa Elbially.
Yes.
All right, got it right the second time. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
If you're a Muslim, keep your mouth shut. Know your rights. And if you're a non-Muslim, you should keep your mouth shut too, because you got to know your rights. And definitely many of those listeners to this podcast came out of the Ferguson uprising, Ferguson movement. And we saw what happened with a lot of civil liberties and people like that. This your man, Umar Ali. Peace.